A mindset coach is somebody who works with you to really unpick those things that are going on in your brain that keep you fixed in certain behaviors. And so it might be, for example, if I take myself, this mindset that I had about you can't succeed, it's uncovering that that's there and then trying to work with them to reprogram it. So it kind of works around insight. It's this idea that in a conversation, so if a client comes to me, the first thing I'll do is have a conversation and say, so what's coming up for you today? What is it that you want to talk about? And we work through that. And then we get to that point where do you want to start? And they start talking through what's going on for them. And at that point, what I'm doing is I'm watching them and I'm listening intently. I'm not just looking and listening to the words. I'm watching how that affects their body. So, in one case, for example, she was talking away and I could see this was happening. I'm exaggerating here a little bit, but you kind of go, I'm noticing that when you're saying that, you're really tensing up. I'm wondering what's going on for you. So it's really that questioning, and it's open questions, getting the client to explore what's happening in their bodies. And for a lot of my women, that's quite a novelty for them to really kind of think about what is going on in my body? What are these thoughts? And then and feelings, and then to really start to identify them. So, we had with one client this idea of angel and demon thoughts. So the angel thoughts, when she had the angel thoughts, she felt really warm and fuzzy and really excited. But when she had the demon thoughts, she felt really miserable and closed and tense. And she was aware that she was having more demon thoughts than she was having angel thoughts. So we had to kind of uncover where that was coming from and why. So that's really what a mindset coach is. They're working with your thinking, with your brain, and working with you so that you can experiment as to what will help you change that really deep inner pattern of thinking. Insight activation is actually what I've called my group program, but it's also really what I'm about. So when we were talking earlier about mindset, this is around trying to support women to identify something, and it doesn't matter what it is, and it's that aha moment. So that insight is the aha moment, and often that one thing, that one aha, can then be the big transformative thing that we can work on, because it's not the answer, it's not the end. That big aha is the start of the next process. Aha, that's what's going on from me, so how do I change that? And then we can work together to co-create a transformation plan. But the transformation plan requires experiments. And I'm a former scientist, so I love the word experiment. But this is kind of your deliberate practice, but it's an experiment because it might not work. And it's about doing things that work for you. So in order to find the things that work for you, you have to try lots of different things and experiment with them. So what we do in sessions is we identify the experiment that the client is going to do between this session and the next. And it's their experiment, it's their decision, and it's their choice as to when and how they do it. There's no pressure from me as to particular strategies. It's what's going to work for them. But some of the times what I will do is I will say, I noticed this. In order to reprogram your brain, you might find this useful. It's not me telling them what to do. It's if they're really stuck, giving them a range of different ideas that they can choose from. And sometimes it's just around them they get the insight and they go, now what? So then we have to really dig deep around where that insight's taking them and what that might mean for them, and also how that's shown up in so many different places for them, so that we can start to work on the next steps gradually. And sometimes sometimes the insight might happen within the first minute of the coaching session. And sometimes it might be weeks before the real sort of big, deep thought occurs. But that's okay, because it is all about uncovering the deep hidden thinking and being able to change it. Within each session, because I'm a former teacher, within each session, we do check-ins. So I have this process of setting the agenda for the session, which is done with the client, and the client sets the agenda. And then what I might do is partway through say, hang on a minute, can we just check in here? How's this showing up for you? You said this at the start of the session. I just want to check in whether this is where we're still going or whether this is something else. And towards the end of the session, I'll also be saying things like, so where do you think this has taken you? Do you believe you've moved forward with this? What is it that you've taken out of this session? So throughout, I'm kind of checking in with the client, what's going well for them and areas that they're struggling with. So there's a real efficacy in this process, and it's all around the client. The client is doing the thinking and the client is making the decisions. But at times, I get a sense in the session that the client's not in the right place for the session at that time. And I think one of the bravest things you can do as a coach is go, do you know what? Can I just check in with you? I'm not sure that this is working out for you today. I just want to check. Do you want to continue, or shall we leave it for today? And, I've had clients say, no, can we continue? And I've had clients say, no, let's leave it for today. And I think that's also important, because it's the client's time, not my time. And that's the bit I need, it's this whole idea of serving the client. So if it's not meeting the client's needs because of something for the client that day, then it's absolutely appropriate to say, let's call it a day today, or come back again at a different time. And yeah, that's kind of how they know that it's meeting their needs, because we check in it all the time. It's really interesting, this. There's a big field in psychology, and we don't really know how the brain works. But what we do know about the brain is it affects how we feel. I mean, we just have to look at that whole idea of why they experiment with placebos. They give you a medication, you think you're getting a medication, but actually you're just getting a sugar sweet. But yet you feel the benefits and you feel better afterwards. So the brain is an incredibly powerful agent. And the thing about the brain is it can do us good. And in its attempts to keep us safe, it can also cause us harm. So one of the things around mindset coaching is we can uncover those thoughts and feelings that are deep and hidden, and we can start to reprogram the brain's automatic response to how you feel. And to give an example, you might feel like you've got no right to exist. And I'm not talking about depression here, but you just don't feel that you're worthy in the place that you're in. Or you might feel like you're a constant failure. There's no point in trying because you're never going to succeed. And when you feel like that, you feel ill and you feel miserable and your whole body feels terrible. So we kind of need to uncover what's going on there so we can change that, so you feel much better about yourself. And when you feel much better about yourself, you feel much better in terms of your physical well-being. And the real evidence of this is in the stats on menopause. Women in the UK report more symptoms of menopause and more intense symptoms of menopause than anywhere else in the world. Now, we are still the same women. The only difference is the culture around women and where they sit when they hit menopause. And there's this culture that says you're entering the end of your life, you're off the shelf now, you're not much use to us. And that affects how we feel within a menopause, which affects the physical sensations we get. And that's very clear evidence there. So I'll use myself as an example here. I used to have this, I got to this point in my career where for the first time ever, I was struggling to get to the next level in terms of the next promotion. And I started to believe that it was never going to happen. So my mindset was, oh, well, there's no point, and I really wasn't making an effort. And it came to a head when I did an interview whereby they sent in advance the presentation they wanted us to do, but said, you will only do this presentation if you get to the very last section of the interview process. And there was something going on in my brain that said, don't do it, because you'll be wasting your effort because you won't get to the final interview. Well, of course, I did get to the final interview, but my presentation was rushed. And strangely enough, I didn't get the job. But I'd sabotaged myself. So the thing around mindset coaching, and this is when I was really introduced to it, was I was working with an exceptional coach within the school at this point. He was brought into the school. He was an external person, but he was exceptional. And he helped me uncover this hidden deep belief within me that was basically, don't try just in case you fail. But I didn't know that was there, because I thought I was the sort of person who would just go about and do stuff, and I would always do what I could. But this had come into my thinking, and he helped me identify it. And as a result, I went on to get a headship. So there's a direct impact of the mindset coach and its effect on me, meaning that I got the promotion that I'd gone through 11 interviews to try and get. And previously I'd got the job on either the first or second interview, so you can imagine that this was a real shock to the system, and I went from trying too hard, which is the other thing I used to do, to believe self-sabotaging on failure. And there's so many things that we all do in our career. We have a belief as a female, perhaps, that we might need to only bring our masculine energy to the business. And so we ignore the emotional sides of ourselves, and we don't use our intuition in the way that we should. And by mindset coaching, we can change that belief that you have to show up in a masculine way. And it's a really deeply held one, because it's the experiences we have that make us feel that. And therefore, often women will thrive in the workplace because they're now allowed to be who they are, because they're giving themselves permission to be who they are. Nobody else is telling them to turn up like that. It's their inner dialogue that's doing it. So as a mindset coach, we work with whatever it is that matters to that person and the blocks that come up around that in order to change it. So if that is within a career or within work, then that is what we work with. So this is really interesting. And I've recently just listened to a couple of testimonials which say exactly that. And that was really lovely to hear. And I think I would say I co-create the transformation, but it's by providing them as a thinking partner, a really honest thinking partner. And as one of the testimonials says, I'm not afraid to go where it might be painful. And that can be really challenging. I knew in the session where I worked with this particular person, and I've done it with others, I knew that what I said next could well feel hurtful to the other person, and that they may not take it in the way that I needed them to. But I also felt that I needed to say it in order for them to unblock the thing that was getting in the way. And that makes a real difference. So it's bravery to really to go where perhaps they're blocking you going, and to stop that blocking so that they can then create the next change that really makes a difference to them. And it is, one client said to me, "You're the first person who's ever got my thinking." And I said, that's easy, because it's you getting your thinking, not me getting your thinking. And I think that's where mindset coaching comes in. I talk about being the mirror to the person. I'm like a mirror. I'm reflecting back what they're saying to me, but I'm using all my senses in doing that. This is really interesting, because I was talking to a former student who's actually an exceptional coach, and he said that my approach to teaching used coaching, and it used mindset coaching. I would work with the young people to enable them to feel like they could succeed. And once they felt like they could succeed, they did succeed. And so I guess I've been coaching in that respect for a while. Now, I don't say teaching is coaching, but I do believe that to get the best out of people, you have to really work with them. So I explored, and following my experiences of working with an exceptional coach, I felt it was really important that I understood the process so that I could provide that same professional development for my staff. So I started working with my staff in a coaching culture. I created a coaching culture within the school. All my conversations were coaching conversations. And early on, I was really focused on the language I was using. So, it became a joke a little bit, actually, that I would say things like, tell me more, or I'm curious about that, or I notice, because these were all phrases that I'd picked up in my coaching training, as well as in being in the experience of being coached myself. But I found that it was really powerful, both in team meetings, one-to-one with staff, in professional development, in providing opportunities for every member of staff to flourish. So throughout my tenure as a head, which was just over 10 years, I was coaching continuously, because I got the coaching training and I knew what I was doing, and I was developing and honing my skills, because at the same time I was coaching, I was also working with a coach. So I was building my skill set whilst also building the skill set of my staff, and it really flourished and had a major impact. I then went on to start to develop a coaching culture across the trust that I was working with before I left. Kind of touched on it earlier, didn't I? So my teaching and leadership background, it's really important within the community that I'm developing on Facebook. So I'm creating a community of women who are determined to see their future differently. And I'm doing that through empowering and educating them. And that is my skills as a leader and my skills as an educator. You know, I do regular Facebook Lives where I engage with the audience. It's not me talking, it's them interacting with me, because I build them like a lesson. There are questions within there. They grow, the knowledge builds on each bit, and it also builds based on the feedback I'm getting from the audience at the time. And that's very much that teaching approach. I think, you know, I was an exceptional teacher, and this is transferring into the way I'm doing my community work within the group. So I think it's important there. I think it's also my background as a scientist and as a science teacher, because I believe that not only do women need information, they need information that they can understand, that they can access, that is also grounded in fact, because there's so much different information out there around menopause. And what I do before those sessions is I look and I research and I go, okay, these are all the different sorts of information that's out there. Let's look at where the evidence sits and let's go forward with that. And let's support what I'm saying with the evidence that's around. And as I say, that's kind of my science background, my science teaching background, because I know that we learn best there are several different ways that different people need information, but having some clear facts that they can then relate to self is really helpful. And I've been told that really makes a difference for the community that I'm working with. And I see myself as leading that community of women. And so I'm bringing my leadership skills, because my vision is to empower women. And as a leader, I was an empowering leader. I felt that empowerment was much the better way forward than telling people what to do. I needed to give them the skill set they needed to do their job better. And I now see it as giving women the skill set and the information they need so that they can live their lives better. My personal journey into coaching has really influenced what I'm doing. So as I've talked about, you know, I'm an educator by trade. I'm a scientist by background. I used to work as an engineer, and I was good at my job. And then I started not being good at my job. And that was really hard, because I wasn't very forgiving of myself. But I also had this drive that said, but I'm in a position of responsibility. I owe it to my staff, which actually meant I didn't put me first, which was one of my first rules of first aid. I always used to tell my staff, you put yourself first. And when you put yourself first, you're in a better place to support our young people in the school. And I ignored that rule for myself. And when I've reflected back, what was really happening at this point was the perimenopause was affecting me in so many different ways. I have a default setting, which is don't do today what you can leave till tomorrow. But one of the things that happens in perimenopause is your stress tolerances drop. Now, I was designed to flow off stress, not excessive stress, but a level of stress. And I suddenly found myself not able to do that. But I was a head teacher during the pandemic in perimenopause. It wasn't a great combination, if I'm really honest, you know, and therefore stress was completely out of control, and it started to impact the way I was thinking, to the extent that I eventually had to admit defeat and left with burnout. Now, looking back, I think I was probably in burnout for well over a year before that happened. And when I retired from teaching, I didn't really have a clear view of where I wanted to go and what I wanted to do. But what developed over the 3 months that I was off sick before I finally left was this real desire to make sure that as many women as possible had as much information and knowledge and skill set within them so that this didn't happen to them. So this is very much about trying to give back from the learning that I've had and trying to make sure that fewer women experience that journey into burnout. Because when I researched it, I discovered, and there's some research done with nurses around burnout and perimenopause. And then there's some generalization from that research, which goes into the caring professions in general. It said that women in caring professions in perimenopause had a higher likelihood of experiencing burnout than the general population of women. And there were several factors involved in this. One of them was the type of leadership around them. So that's important. And that's where that bit around teaching women to lead from both their female and their male side and be free to do that. Because far too often in this experience that they were coming across, it was women leaders who were saying things, and it's my personal experience too, who were saying things like, just take your HRT and man up, which is not helpful. So there's this real drive that says that's not fair. And this background knowledge that says this is happening all over the place. It's not just you, it's a lot of people, you know, and when they've looked at this across like police, social care, teaching, you know, all of these different areas, there's that same thing. And I would say, and I would argue actually, that it's not about the professions, it's about the nature of the females, because so many of us are driven to care for others first, which puts us at risk of burnout. So it's also about giving women permission to put themselves first. And the best way to do that is to use my skill set, and my absolute love of psychology and coaching, and my ability as a scientist to drive forward the job that I'm doing now. My personal journey is one of suffering burnout and realizing that I didn't look after myself, realizing that I put myself at the back burner. And I had all of these beliefs going on. I must. One of them was, I need to stay in the job that I know I'm not doing very well at and I no longer desire, because I'm the only wage earner in the house and we need the money coming in. So one of those was that. And one of them was also, there was also this need, because I was ill with burnout, that I needed to leave. I got to that point where I said, I can't do this anymore. I was in tears all the time. I mean, that's not effective as a head teacher of an SCMH school. It really isn't a good idea. And I was also, I'd lost my resilience. And in that profession, you need resilience. I didn't have any resilience. I was getting irritated by the slightest little thing. All really bad signs in that job. And it was really about needing to leave. But then realizing once I'd left that I also needed to still have a purpose and still have a drive and still have something that I was giving back to the world, because it's really important to me to make a difference in the world. Doesn't matter how big or small, it's just, you know, it's that butterfly effect. I want to do something. And, you know, working with a mental health practitioner who worked in employment, actually, in conversation with her, it kind of developed that this research I was doing was really important to me and that I wanted to share it. So we together, if you like, came up with this plan that I would go into coaching, which I then gradually explored. I kind of started looking online at Facebook groups and looking and seeing what was going on and trying to see how to get on with those things. I started interacting in some of those groups and just sort of dropping a line. One person that said something, I went about leadership and self-leadership, and I went, oh, I can help with that, you know. And then I looked at my Facebook profile, my LinkedIn profile, and I changed that. So it was little by little. But the one thing I'd learned was I didn't need to put pressure on myself because of the burnout, and I was at massive risk of boom or bust. So a key thing for me has been building this company slowly, building this coaching business slowly, working with my body And in doing so, sharing that journey with my Facebook audience, because I'm not unique. We are all unique in many ways, but I don't sit on my own with this experience. And sharing my story often makes it easier for others to realize they're in that situation. And I have one client who I shared an article about burnout, and a little bit of my journey and about burnout and some of the different things that it can show up as. And she got back to me and she said, "Oh my God, I'm in burnout. I need to go and see." And she was. But it was me sharing my journey that helped her to get help much, much earlier in that process than me. And I think, if I can do that, even if it's only one or two people, that I'm doing that with, then this makes the job I'm doing worthwhile. And that's why I'm doing it.